Hi, this video is for the IT2 classes. We're in the first week of the spring semester. So we are in the first week of class. This is the online lecture. In this, I'm going to cover Introduction to Unity and C# scripting. We're going to create a script at the end of the process. As long as you can follow along and you can create the script and you understand everything I'm saying, then you're good to go with creating your first project deliverables, which include your project description and your user flow diagram. If you get tripped up along the way, so for some point in this lecture, please note that we have our lab times, voluntary lab times, that come in and get that help in our teaching lab. All right, so the first step is let's download and install Unity. So this is the website, unity3d.com. You could just click on, here we go, get started. Yep. This will take you to download Unity. You just need to try personal. It's free. This is the free version of Unity. It's fully featured, everything you need. You just accept the terms and click download. If you're planning on using Unity in future classes, then get the Unity Hub. This is a kind of a manager application that lets you download multiple versions and open up them in different versions of Unity because it gets updated frequently. If not, you can just download the installer for Windows. Just install whatever the most recent version of Unity is. If you wanted to follow along exactly with me and have the exact version of Unity, you go to the older versions. I am currently on this one, 2018.2.20. You can download it right here. There's not much difference at all between that and the most recent one, which is this 2018.3.3, which if you go back, that is what you will download, the most recent one, which is 2018.3.3. Either case, you end up downloading it, wait till it installs. It'll give you some prompts, where are you going to install it, and it's going to ask you what additional features do you wish to install. And it's not the end of the world if you don't install them now. You can install them later, but just to make things easy, just make sure you keep on Visual Studio and WebGL build. So Visual Studio is a coding environment called an IDE, an integrated development environment. It's just basically a text editing software which is made and tailored for programmers to write code. There's a lot of smart text filling in, a lot of pops up with methods and classes that you might want to use as you're typing stuff. It just helps you out and it shows you bugs and issues and coding errors that you need to fix to let your code run quickly. So anyway, as you're installing Unity, just make sure that installing Visual Studio is clicked on, and to also install the WebGL build features. If later on in the sprint you forget to install WebGL or something, come talk to me. Again, it's a very easy process to get through to install it after Unity is already installed. But at the end of the day, you download, install Unity, and if you run it for the first time, that's Unity Hub. I wanted to show you regular Unity. That's all right. Looks very similar. Also, the Visual Studio is the community version. That's free. And let me close down this. And here's my 2020. All right, this is what I wanted to show you. So this is what Unity looks like when it's done and installed, and you double click it and open it. It gives you a project window. Unity's not fully opened yet. It's just saying, do you wish to open some projects you've already opened, or do you want to open a new project? So you will have to You don't have to create an account with Microsoft for Visual Studio, but it will make things easier. Again, Visual Studio is free. You just link it when you first run Visual Studio for the first time. It'll just ask you to log in with whatever your Microsoft account is. I suggest you do that. As far as Unity goes, you do have to create a Unity account, and it is free as well. And just know that when you click on it, it kind of looks like this. Like, here's my settings, and you have access to certain features in Unity. But when you open it for the first time, here's the project window. Click New, and then navigate to where you want to create your location. For me, I'll say D, Unity projects. Say select folder. This is the root where I'm gonna start my project, and we're gonna do a template. Just keep it on 3D. That's fine. Everything is this organization. Your name should be filled out if you're logged in with your Unity account. And project name, you can just say like IT201 project, or something along the lines of this. And then you click create. And just give it a second. So you'll notice is these little pop-up windows. This is like creating files, processing them, editing them, getting Unity ready for the first time. Every time you open a project, it opens up like a brand new instance of Unity. So you'll see this a lot, like when you're opening projects, or if you change files in a project, or if you change build settings, you just kind of have to leave it alone and let it do its thing. So anyway, this just is saying that there's a newer version of Unity. That's fine. I can turn that off if you don't want to see that every time. Let me just resize the window to fit my screencasting portion. All right, almost there. There we go. That's about good. All right, so this is what Unity looks like. First off, these are a bunch of tabs all over the place. We have our file menu up top with all the real standard commands for the program that you should be used to, like Windows or Mac. Also, this you can download for the Mac as well. So if you have Mac, it might look a little differently, but it does function the same. So we have all of our core, I guess, commands up top here. I'll go through these later, but just notice that there's a bunch of tabs, menus, windows all over the place. I'm only going to point over to services here first because we're actually not using that, and that looks rather complicated. And I'm just going to click over to inspector, which we do use. So I'll click over to there. In fact, I could take services, and I'm just going to pop off the tab. You can make them either docked or floating, any of these windows. So right now this is floating and it's trying to dock somewhere. This is what it looks like docked. You can put it as a tab of others, or you can pull it to a spot where it's now floating. All right, so any of these windows that have these little tabs, you can do that too. All right, but just know that I pulled off the services tab and I'm gonna click X. So we're not gonna use that. So inspector is good, we want that. The game view is good, we want that. Scene view is good, we want that. This is the asset store. We might make use of some assets later on, but just know that there's like a ton of content, both graphics and animations and code and anything else you can think of that works in Unity. People have made it and they're either putting it up for free or they're trying to sell it for money. So I'm just going to right click and click close tab. So now we have our hierarchy, our scene view, our game view, our inspector. That's all great. Down here we have our project view and a few other stuff underneath here. So project view we're going to make use of. The console we're going to make use of as we're scripting. For right now we're not going to get into the animation or the animator. That's more Sprint 3. So I'm just going to close them. Just to simplify things. If you ever really mess up something, like if you just pull stuff all over and you can't find it and you delete it and everything looks a complete mess, you don't know what to do, just go to Window, Layouts, and you can just go back to default, and then this will reset the inspector. All right, so I'm going to close assets and game view. I'm just going to pull back over here so that we have different views that we can talk about, or different windows or panes or whatever you're used to discussing. I'm going to go to the console, and I noticed that when I was over here that there was this little error down here. We're going to talk about these little messages, but for now I'm going to go console and clear it out because nothing is like detrimental, really damaging. That was just a little error that popped up because I reset the layout, and there was I like already closed one of the windows. So I'm just going to get rid of that. We're going to talk about the console later. So I guess the root of it we could talk about is the project contains files that are external. Right now we don't have any, but just be aware that if I right click and say show and explore, it's going to bring up the Explorer window, and if you notice, this is under D, Unity Projects, IT21 project. So if you remember when I created the project, I said I want to place the project in D, Unity Projects, and then I name the project IT21 project. So just know that this is where my project lives. It's because I created it. It's easy to get to if you need to reference anything, if you need to find files, you just do show explore. What I also wanted to make a connection with you about is that this down here in the project window is like a recreation of the file explorer. So your file system is recreated in Unity. You don't have to use the system default, whether it's Windows or Mac, whatever the file explorer is, but just know that these files are replicated here. So if I go into assets, here's scenes. All right, and so this is just, we'll get into scenes and other external files, but they live on your hard drive right where you created the project, and they exist right here in Unity and show you the folders and the files, and so you don't even need to use a file explorer most of the time. So that's the point of the project view. It's for all these external files. We have the scene view. We're looking out into our virtual game world. Here we have the game view, what the player will see, what you will see when you click play, when you build it. And the hierarchy shows what is in the game scene. So everything is based on like levels or scenes. You have multiple levels, but we are just doing one level. And it is going to be interactable, and you can test when we build some more complicated functions. You can actually click play in the editor to test out what your experience, what your app, what your game is like before you actually have to build it. That's a huge benefit of this system. So to start with, I am just going to create a 3D object because it'll give us something to focus on, and as I describe other stuff. So if I go up to game object, first off, let me describe these scenes. We have the file, so new scene, open scene. So these are scenes within the project. You can open up other projects, create a new project. You can save this project. A project has multiple assets, multiple scenes. At the end of the day, everything that lives within your project is what you use to build your application or the end result. In this case, it's going to be a WebGL build, an HTML build of this painting tool. But scenes are separate; they live within the project. Like this one right here is our sample scene. And other file stuff. This is actually where we're going to build. So eventually we're going to build to WebGL, but we'll get to that later. So this is what the build settings look like. We have a basic edit, undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, duplicate, and delete. That's all you have to really be aware of right now. Assets. So this is where we create assets in our project, so we can create folders and scripts, and later on maybe some materials and animations and what have you, but really just folders and scripts, C# scripts. We can import packages, which are kind of like combinations or collections or like zip files of content. We're not doing any of that, so I think we're good. Game objects. This is where you can create game objects that live in your hierarchy, live in your game scene. So here I'm going to create a 3D object, and this is going to continue our conversation. But just components, I'm going to skip for now. Window. I showed you window very briefly. I said if things really get messed up, you can go to layouts and just reset your layout. And yeah, as I closed other stuff, like you saw I closed like the animation and window, this is where you would get to reopen it. Anyway, I'm going to go game object 3D, and I am going to create let's say a cube. So a few things happened here. You see in our scene view, or looking into our game world, this cube appeared, and there's this gizmo, this tool on it. Here in our game view, the actual player view, what they'll see when we build, the cube has appeared. And in our hierarchy here, you see that now there's a cube, and the cube's highlighted, and actually my inspector, since it's highlighted, the inspector shows information about this game object, this cube. And there's many parts of the information that we will go over. For now, that's how you can create some basic stuff. So again, it's game object. We're just dealing with some 3D objects right now. You can create others if you wish to. So let's say a sphere. So we have a cube, a sphere, and you can kind of see the sphere, and I'll zoom in a little bit. I don't want to get to the camera controls just yet, but the sphere is sitting right on top of the cube, so that's this little gizmo to move. Now the sphere is off a little bit, and actually I can talk about the position right here. So this is one information that the inspector, the panel here that talks about the information of this object, what exists in our hierarchy of objects. Here is, I'm changing the position of it, and you can see it being updated in the scene view and the game view that we're seeing. Notice how if I keep moving it goes off the game view. If I click on this camera icon here, or this main camera, which is the same thing, anything that exists in our world will be represented in the hierarchy. Sometimes stuff does not have a visual connection to it. Sometimes it's just like code or something else. So for example, if I take the sphere and I turned off the renderer on it, you would say, oh, this object, all that exists in this world is this light, this camera, and this cube. But this is our visual representation of what's happening in our game level, our app. That's why a hierarchy, or seeing everything, a list, is helpful as well to see that, oh, there might be some stuff there that's invisible. And so I'm starting to modify information on an object that lives in our scene through the inspector. And that's the point of all these panels, and then the gameplay, what we're actually seeing when we play the game. So the camera, a light, and some 3D objects live in the sample scene, which lives in our project. This is the only external file. All this information lives within this file. Notice how there's a little asterisk. This file has been changed. We added some objects, some game objects to it, and changed the information on those game objects in the scene. The file that holds all this information has shown that it's been updated. So I go File, Save. Notice that the asterisk is gone, and there was one up here. If you noticed, it's gone as well. And all this information is saved here. So if I go File, New Scene, it wipes everything out. But don't worry, I can double click. Here's the scene, here's our information. And when we build, we're going to build this scene. The scene will become our app. So for right now, we have a folder called Assets that lives on our computer. And within there, we have one folder called Scenes, and there's this sample scene. This is just the default that came with the project, and I started to modify it. Within the sample scene, we have a camera. You need at least one camera. Usually it's this main camera. It's called main camera. And this is what the player is seeing. So as I move it, notice in my game view, which is also represented down here, when we click on the camera, we get a little preview. And I also happen to have the game view open. So as you move the camera, it might look like the objects are moving, but it's the viewer's perspective, the player's perspective is moving. So I can move it up, down, And what we have in the world is this gray, like what represents the ground, and we have this like sky gradient. Okay, this is the default. I'm just going to leave it. Just know that this comes with the scene. It's supposed to give you some like default perspective on saying, oh, there's a ground here and there's some sky. So you need a camera to render to screen with your app. You need some type of light source. By default, you just get this directional light, which seeks to mimic a infinite light source from far away, or light source from infinitely far away, and that happens to be something that we'll talk about, like we think as the sun. So as I rotate it, which changes the light source, notice as I rotate it, not only does the sky change, we go from like day to night, but the light on the objects change. So now we can talk about moving. We could talk about rotating, and we could talk about scaling. Okay, these are just some basic controls. I'm going to press Control Z. That's not letting me undo, huh? All right, I'll click on this object. Usually when you do each move, it's recorded, and I can just do undo. For some reason, that didn't get recorded. So I'm just going to go back over to this inspector, and I'm going to manually change the information back. So what I wanted to show you is that our tools are up here. This is a grab tool. So it's a very basic, you can click on stuff. This is a move tool. To move something, you have to click on it. Notice how it gets highlighted, and you can click on it. And I'm going to reset the rotation right now because I didn't want to talk about why the tool changed just yet. So I went over here and I zeroed out the rotation. So if you always look at the transform up here, there's everything I'm going to mess around with. I got position. And if you look over here, we have this gizmo up here. So we have X, Y, Z. X, this is by convention. X is left and right. Y is up and down. Z is forward, backward. So technically, the angle of the camera, if we look from the angle of the camera, which is already set up like this, here's the camera looking out. We're kind of like over the shoulder of the player's camera right now. We can see these objects here, and we have left or X, we have Y up and down. Notice how the inspector's changing just on that one axis, and Z, forward and backward. So as I talk about this, notice I can get like the shadow right on the sphere over here. Let me talk about how I'm moving around in the scene view. So we have this scene view. This is you, the editor, the developer, the designer, you looking into the game world, doing your edits, creating this app, and you get to freely look wherever you want, modify anything. And notice how I'm moving around this game view is the same. But if I take this camera and move it, the game view updates. So again, game view is what the player will see, which is from this camera. And you can be technical about it. Say this scene view, this view that the editor, the developer looking around is technically another camera looking into this virtual world. But you don't basically have access to the camera. You don't see it in the hierarchy or anything. So you can do a few operations here. I'm using Alt and left click to what's called tumble, Alt and middle click to zoom in and out, and Alt and that was Alt and right click to zoom in and out, Alt and middle click to pan. Pan is moving left or right, but keeping your like rotation where you're looking at it, keeping it the same. You're just moving left and right. Right. So again, Alt and left click to tumble or rotate around. Notice you can watch the gizmo up here showing my orientation in the world. It kind of gives you a feeling of the movement the camera's doing. We have Alt and middle mouse click. Notice how that compass is not moving right now because I'm not rotating the camera. I'm moving it left and right, up and down with that same rotation. And then I've got Alt and right click for zooming in and out. Now people will also there's another convention, if you hold down right click, and use the W, A, S, and D keys, this is a common movement scheme in the editor because a lot of people are familiar with first-person shooter movements. So to move around a 3D world, here is an alternate navigation scheme. You can move like you're almost a character in the world. That's holding down the right mouse button and pressing W for forward, S for back, A for left, D for right. And notice as you look up and down, as you rotate the mouse, you're changing where you're looking. So if you're looking up, you're going to move up a little bit too, and if you're looking down, and so on. So you kind of get used to this. And then if you want to just straight up move up and down, that's E key for up and Q key for down. So in total, that's 6 buttons that you should be familiar with. Basically, everyone's played a video game once in their life. So you can use this convention, or you can hold down the Alt key and do tumble. So I got to continue talking about the Alt key. When you tumble around something, or you rotate in a 3D world, there's a point in which you must rotate around. So if I move this really far away, right, and I'm rotating right now, or tumbling, right? I'm tumbling around right now the world's center. We can see this little grid area. If I take this sphere and just zero out his X, Y, and Z, he sits at world space 0. You kind of have to start somewhere, right, in this arbitrary world. So world space 0 is the dead center of the world. And I can tumble around it really easily, and I can see the sphere really easily. But I'm having issues seeing the cube at times because he's so far out. And notice I'm kind of tumbling around, kind of like I'm orbiting around the center. And that's actually what you're doing. That's what tumble is doing. If you click on another object and you want to frame up on them, press the F key. Not only do you kind of zoom up on him, but if I pull it out a little bit, I'm just kind of scrolling on my middle mouse wheel, which is an alternate to Alt, to holding down Alt and right click. Just kind of scroll the middle mouse wheel. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to tumble. And notice how I'm tumbling around the cube, and I'm not tumbling around the sphere anymore. So I've framed up on an object, and that's my center point to move around. And I'm actually centered up and rotating around it, and the sphere, which is in world space center, is off on the side. And if I press the F key, I will actually zoom in up on it. So I've covered movement, I've covered looking in the scene view, creating a few 3D objects that you can actually move them as well. We'll get more into this next week, but just some basics. Like, I'll get into more about different parts of this move tool. I'll get into the rotate tool. There's a sphere, you don't really see it, but if I scale it a little bit strangely and rotate it, you see I'm rotating a different axis. I don't really want to get into rotation and scaling right now. What I'll do is reset, and here I am zoomed up on the center, which is spheres, and we have objects that we can delete them. I can press the delete key, and we went over the camera, we went over the light, some objects, that's stuff that's in the hierarchy. Notice that my scene has changed again, there's an asterisk. And this is information on an object. And so we just kind of went over the transform information a little bit, how that can change. That's going to be, and I've covered the hierarchy view, the scene view, the game view, the inspector, and the project view. And then you can go File, Save, when you save your scene. Now that's going to cover the basics of Unity, and then I'm going to create another video next to cover Visual Studio and the basics of scripting. Thank you.